Mr. AJ,
That's Pharmacist Ben. How are you today?
good. Got my BTT.
Oh, you got your
You ready to
BTT?
go?
Oh,
I'm
mine
gonna
is
be
over
on
there.
I'm gonna be on George Nori tonight. I gotta get all amped up with my Beyond Tangy and my pollen burst.
You are a busy man.
I am a busy man. That
You're the
is true.
James Brown of nutrition.
I love this. I love what I do. Sometimes when I'm feeling a little down in the dumps, you know what I do? I pick up the phone and call somebody who I can help. Or I look through this list of people that have emailed me and I try to help them. That's to me, that's what makes life worthwhile, is making a positive difference in people's lives. And by the way, that's why longevity is so cool. Is because it's a platform for helping people. And there's so many people who need help. There's so many people who need help who don't understand how their bodies work. And because of that, they find themselves doing what everybody else does, or what they've been conditioned to do, or what the culture tells them to do, which is go to the doctor. And I love my medical friends, my doctor friends, and my nurse friends, and they're beautiful people. This isn't about ripping on physicians, but the paradigm, the model is not equipped to take care of the vast majority of our health issues, which are chronic and degenerative. Chronic meaning they just never end, and degenerative meaning the body deteriorates, it
Breaks it.
degenerates. The body's a regenerating system. Healing is regeneration. The body's meant to regenerate, but when you have a condition like diabetes or cancer or heart disease or autoimmunity or dementia or skin problems, skin diseases, the body doesn't heal. It just degenerates. It gets worse. And so the vast majority of our health problems are chronic, never ending, and degenerative. They just get worse and worse and worse. And there's nothing in the medical model's bag of tricks that can help with these challenges. Nothing. And it's not their fault. They're just not equipped. They don't have the tools, because chronic degenerative diseases are lifestyle based. They're based in food or the wrong kinds of food. They're based in nutrition or the lack of nutrition. They're based in lack of exercise and movement. They're based in inflammation. They're based in lifestyle conditions that we've created ourselves. And there's nothing medicine can do to fix those. Medicine's great for repairing bones if you break them, for stitching you up if you get some kind of cut or trauma or fall off your bike or a garage door hits you on the head or whatever it is. That's great. Medicine's great for that. But in the way of chronic degenerative disease, it's helpless. It doesn't have the tools to help. But it doesn't matter, because those tools are readily available, and that's what longevity is about. It's about providing the tools for helping prevent, ideally, or reverse the symptoms and the signs and the progression of chronic degenerative diseases. And not only does longevity provide the tools, it provides the know-how. And that's what we're about. That's what I'm about. That's what my whole life is about. My personal life, my professional life, my spiritual life. It's about providing the know-how. And this is why I love longevity. And this is why I've been in longevity since 1998, 26 years.
98.
26 years.
Wow.
It started in 97. I joined in 1998. And I've been in longevity because longevity provides me with the opportunity to make a difference in the world. And it can provide you listening out there an opportunity to make a positive difference in the world and make some money at the same time. It's not even the money. The money's great. That's fine. You're going to make money. But it's about making a difference, helping people. And the Bible says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. And that's what's happening. We're perishing because we don't understand how our bodies work, how to take care of our bodies, and the medical model is not helping us. In fact, in many ways, let me pop this up here real quick. They're not only not helping us, let me see here. Not only not helping us, they're making it worse. I can't mention it. I can't say anything, We'll get cut off.
They might see it for themselves.
Right? They might see it. I don't think the AI can read it. I think they just wait for the word. So I'm not going to say what it is, but they make it worse. And I don't want anybody to think that it's a doctor's fault and a person's fault. It's the paradigm, the model. Although I have to say, those emergency room docs that got on the news 4 years ago telling everybody to do you know what, I want to stick my hand through the TV set and choke a couple of them.
Which
So
ones? The ones
I'm
that
not going to
were
mention any
pro or
names.
con?
Oh, they were telling people, oh, you have to go get this. It's safe and
Yeah.
it's going to affect it.
Oh,
Blah, blah,
those.
blah,
Yeah,
blah.
yeah.
Oh, come on. All right. So anyway, what are we going to talk about today? Are there people online here on board?
Okay, well, there's one person who got a whose sister um, got a jab, and she's got severe skin issues now.
All right.
I don't have
Let's
any
talk about it.
images.
Well, yeah. First of all, just reminder, it's not unusual. The impact of you know what on inflammatory skin disorders and other cutaneous disease, a review of the literature, and these are all the things that can happen when you get the you know what. Psoriasis and lichen planus, which is a particularly nasty condition, atopic dermatitis and eczema. All of these, by the way, alopecia areata, you can lose your hair, pemphigus vulgaris. These are all immune conditions. The skin's an immune organ. So when you have a skin condition, for the most part, you're dealing with some kind of defensive response, whether it's autoimmune or whether it's just immune. And the fact is the only time you're going to have a defensive response, with rare exceptions on the skin, topically, you can have certain immune responses. Even then, there's usually predispositions that are coming in from the blood. But for the most part, when you're dealing with, like this gal you're talking about had a facial eruptions, I guess, is that what she had facial rashes? And yeah, I'd love to see a picture of it, but it's an immune reaction. Rosacea, immune reaction. Psoriasis, immune reaction. Acne, immune reaction. Eczema, immune reaction. The immune system is the defense system. When you bypass the liver and the intestine and go right into the bloodstream, the body will mount an immune response, a defensive response, because the blood is the sacred space. It doesn't happen always, but it can happen. So if you get injected, it can happen. Now, I always talk about leaky gut. And the more I study this, I've been studying this for decades, the more I'm absolutely 100% convinced that all chronic degenerative disease is initiated by a leaky gut, which in turn is the end result of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which can be caused by problems with stomach acid, low stomach acid, or bile issues, or eating the wrong food, or chronic constipation. In any case, once things get into the blood, that's when you run into problems. This is really not that complicated when you think about it. The blood's the sacred space. The blood is delivering nutrients, the blood is delivering oxygen, and the blood is detoxifying. And the blood is the carrier of all of the immune cells. So once you get into the bloodstream, once you inject foreign substances, or once you secrete foreign substances into the bloodstream, stuff that shouldn't be in the bloodstream, it's inevitable you're going to have an immune response. That immune response can show up on the skin. It can show up in the connective tissue. The connective tissue filters the blood. The blood runs through the connective tissue, and the connective tissue acts like a net or like a strainer, and the toxins from the blood sit in the connective tissue, and this is where connective tissue diseases come from. And many autoimmune diseases affect the connective tissue, scleroderma and lupus and Sjogren's. These are all, even cancer is a connective tissue, largely a connective tissue driven issue. So when you look at all the diseases we have, and according to the medical model, there's 10,000 different diagnoses, but they're all like leaves on a tree. And all the leaves if you have rotten leaves on a tree, all the rot is coming in from the trunk and the root. The trunk and the root will address the leaves. You can't address the leaves by themselves. You can't fix a rotten leaf or rotten fruit, but you can get down into the root, into the soil, into the trunk, the beginnings. And that's what the digestive system represents, the beginnings. Now, injecting things through the blood, that's another way that things can get into the blood. For most people, that's not the case. For most people, it's leaky gut. Although the last couple of years, we've had a large increase in the amount of people who are injecting things in through the blood for obvious reasons. And that's where these health challenges come from. What is the number one health challenge that's associated with this injection? Cardiomyopathy, heart disease, pericarditis, blood clots. Well, hello, come on. Obviously, that's when these emergency room docs got on TV. One guy from Arizona, from a hospital in Arizona. I don't want to mention anybody's names, but these people were egregious. Oh, don't worry about it. Just stick it in. We trust us. No, you don't stick things into your bloodstream unless you absolutely positively have no other options. certainly not prophylactically or preventatively. That's absurd. So in any case, if you did get injected, there are things that you might want to consider for detox. First of all, one of the most important things you could do is you can mitigate or reduce the amount of toxicity that's getting into the blood from other places, i.e. from the gut. So if you did get injected and you want to make sure that you don't run into problems, it becomes extra important that you take care of a leaky gut and intestinal health. That alone, just taking care of a leaky gut and intestinal health, will go a long way towards reducing the symptoms or reducing the likelihood of having symptoms from a chronic degenerative disease or toxicity from the injection. So work on a leaky gut, and there's tons of ways to do it. One of my favorite things about longevity is that we have all of these wonderful digestive health supplements. For example, the Daily Digest. You got the Daily Digest there? There you go. The digestive health pack, which has the Beyond Tangy Tangerine and the OsteoFX and the Ultimate EFAs, in addition to some other digestive health supplements like the Nightly Essence, my favorite probiotic, the Ultimate Enzymes. Digestive enzymes do double duty here. Let me tell you what digestive enzymes do. Obviously, they're digestive enzymes. They're going to help you digest your food. But digestive enzymes taken on an empty stomach have a blood cleansing effect. They have an anti-inflammatory effect on the blood. So get your Ultimate Enzymes and take them on an empty stomach if you're worried about toxicity from an injection or any kind of blood toxicity, or just prophylactically, just preventatively. I've been really loving, as you know, the I-26. I-26, or hyperimmune egg, is egg powder that comes from eggs that have been laid by chickens that have been inoculated with an antigen, a bad guy, and they've mounted an antibody response to that bad guy, that antigen. And the antibodies, which are basically heat-seeking missiles for bacteria, come out in the egg. And when you take the I-26, you get these antibodies, and they kill bacteria in the intestine. One of the most important causes of leaky gut is SIBO. In fact, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is really where it all begins. Bacteria are only supposed to be in the large intestine. They translocate to the small intestine under conditions of low stomach acid or bile problems or chronic constipation or eating the wrong foods. And once they get into the intestine, the small intestine, that's when you're really off to the disease races, because they proliferate, because there's food in the small intestine. The reason nature has set up a system for these bacteria to be in the large intestine is because there's no food in the large intestine, but there's food in the small intestine. And if you have bacteria and you have food, you have basically a petri dish, a culture for bacteria to proliferate. So once they translocate to the large intestine, that's when you really run into problems. These bacteria can cause an inflammatory response at the level of the intestinal lining. Secretions go into the blood, and that's really where disease begins. Now, there's a couple other things that cause inflammation at the level of the intestine, and one is fried fats and processed fats. Dr. Wallach's been talking about this for years, and he's absolutely right on. You never want to fry or cook or heavily processed fats. And most of the oils that we get in the supermarket are already, before you even cook with them, before you even do anything with them, in the bottle, they're already heated and adulterated. But then you go into cooking and frying in your kitchen or your restaurant, and then you can have a completely distorted fat. And let me tell you something. Fats are extremely fragile and extremely important when it comes to inflammation and anti-inflammation. In fact, it's fats that mediate the inflammatory process. In fact, there's good fats that are small chunks of fats. For example, did you know there's a fat called PEA, palmitoyl ethanolamide, PEA, which is called. And you can buy it. You can just get it on the internet. It's an incredible pain-relieving fat for people who are dealing with inflammatory pain. It's a short little fat molecule. Another one's called anandamide, another anti-inflammatory fat molecule. There's another one called another small little fat that's got anti-inflammatory properties. It's called acetylmyristoliate. Longevity's got a wonderful acetylmyristoliate cream, CMO cream, acetylmyristoliate, CMO cream, or also CMO capsules. This acetylmyristoliate, or CMO, like anandamide or like PEA, has anti-inflammatory properties, pretty dramatic anti-inflammatory properties. And the CM cream is great for folks who have arthritis. You can just rub it right on your arthritis, and it's completely benign and completely non-toxic. My favorite example of a small fat that has anti-inflammatory properties
ALA?
is, no, I'll give you a clue.
Omega-3?
No, not quite. I'll give you another clue.
The cannabis, it sounds like.
Cannabis, cannabinoids. Endocannabinoids are anti-inflammatory. And
because you live in
this is why they have
Colorado.
What's that?
It's because you live in Colorado.
It's because I live in Colorado. But people don't realize that these endocannabinoids are small fats. And these small fats are, they technically call them lipid mediators. And these lipid mediators control inflammation and anti-inflammation. Here's where it gets really interesting. If you have a fat metabolism or fat processing issue, that is, you don't have a gallbladder, or you have a messed up gallbladder, or you have fatty liver disease, or your bile is sludgy, your body's going to start to accumulate pro-inflammatory fats. These pro-inflammatory fats are one of the major reasons for not only disease, not only degenerative diseases and inflammatory diseases, including cancer, by the way, but also for senescence or aging. Cells are lined with fats. And if your body is producing these pro-inflammatory fats because you got a messed up gallbladder or bile, your cells are going to become distorted. Or if you're eating fried fats, French fries and pizza and deep fried Twinkies and tempura and all these things that we love, these fried fats, those fried fats, those distorted fats are going to get incorporated into cells, and your cells are not only not going to work properly, but they're not going to be able to communicate to other cells properly. And what's even worse is hormones depend on cell membranes for their effect. The hormone has to interact with the cell membrane in order to create an effect inside the cell or to actually get through the membrane into the cell. And if you're accumulating these distorted fats and your cells are now, the cell membranes are now solid, or they're not fluid, they're firm, or they're fibrotic, they're not fibrotic, they're hard, they're not flexible. The hormone's not going to be able to integrate with the membrane effectively. And you can take your hormone replacement therapy all you want, but your hormones aren't going to work. And this is one of the major reasons for accelerated aging or aging in general. So paying attention to fat metabolism and fat processing is critical, and avoiding problem fats. As far as the intestine goes, these fried fats and processed fats are pro-inflammatory. So in addition to a leaky gut being caused by small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, too much bacteria in the intestine, in the small intestine, fried fats can do it. Processed fats can do it. If you're not clearing out your estrogen effectively, estrogen can do it. So strengthening that intestinal lining is really important. One of the best products for strengthening the intestinal lining that nobody talks about, collagen peptides. And by the way, the glucogel caps. In fact, even the gel caps that the EFAs are in, the gelatin itself has a strengthening effect on the intestine. Fucoid Z, wonderfully anti-inflammatory for the mucosa of the intestine, the lining on the intestine. Not to mention laying off your fried fats and your processed foods. In fact, there's a class of foods called the FODMAPs foods. Have you heard of these? FODMAPs?
Absolutely.
Fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. Fancy terms, but basically it means fermentable sugars. Sugars that ferment. Fermentation refers to bacterial action. So these fermentable sugars act as a substrate or act as a food for bacteria, and they feed the bacteria. And that's why sometimes people eat raisins and they'll bloat. Raisins and dried fruits are notorious for being FODMAPs foods. Pears, okra, eggplant, mushy food. FODMAPs tend to be mushy. So mushy fruits, mushy vegetables tend to be high FODMAPs foods. And so people eat these kinds of foods and they'll bloat and they'll be gassy, or they'll end up with inflammation at the level of the intestine, leading to leaky gut. Here, listen, I could go on and on about the causes, but what I want everybody to understand is we have control over all of this. We have control over all this through nutritional supplementation, through dietary strategies, through things like exercise and deep breathing techniques. There's so many ways that we can take control of our health. And you know what it all boils down to, AJ? Let me tell you what it all boils down to. Self-care, self-love, self-nurturing, loving yourself, caring for yourself, nurturing yourself. Yeah, we all love French fries, but it's abusive. Yeah, pizza sounds great, but it's abusive. what happens if we thought of our body like it was a pet, like it was an animal and we were inside it? Would you ever feed your pet like some kind of toxic food or poison food? No. But we don't look at our bodies that way. In fact, we don't even look at our bodies until something goes wrong. That's what, for most of us, that's when we really pay attention to our bodies, when something goes wrong. You can still correct things once they go wrong, but really, under ideal circumstances, you want to prevent things from falling apart. You want to prevent rather than reverse. Reversal's possible. So if you're down the road, you're down the rabbit hole, you're dealing with a health challenge, please understand there are so many ways that you can mitigate or reduce your symptoms and that you can reverse the progression of your disease. The body can turn on a dime, but we have to turn on a dime first. The body can heal. It's built to heal. It's designed to heal. We're the descendants of ancestors who healed. They went out in the jungle or the forest or the savannah, the African savannah, and they got bitten by something or they got scraped by thorns or whatever it was. They healed. The body is designed to heal, and we're the descendants of ancestors who healed, who survived. So it's built into our system. You know what we call the healing process? We call it homeostasis. Maybe you've heard that term, homeostasis. Homeostasis is when lows get pulled up to normal or highs get pulled down to normal. The body's constantly adjusting like a thermostat. It has a set point, and when things get too high, it pulls them down. When things get too low, it pulls them up. How cool is that? This is a smart system. This is an intelligent system. And if it's not doing its thing, if it's not doing its homeostatic thing, something's interfering. And that almost always involves food, digestion, or something that's getting into the body. And if it's not food or digestion, something that's getting into the bloodstream. And by the way, when we say into the body, what we really mean is into the bloodstream. The digestive tract is segregated from the blood, and things are only going to the blood in a controlled fashion from the intestine into the blood. So when we say into the body, we really mean into the blood. The blood is the sacred space. Okay, the life of the body's in the blood. Yes, sir.
So just to wrap that segment, for this particular person who feels as though their skin condition is related to a jab, you're suggesting in addition to the healthy brain and heart pack, you're suggesting possibly the nightly essence on an empty stomach?
All digestive. For somebody to have that kind of severe reaction to the jab tells me there's an underlying predisposition to immune activation. So this is a person, do you know this person, by the way?
An email.
Okay. This is a person who's got some underlying conditions. The jab's not great, but for it to trigger that kind of severe immune reaction means that she's spring-loaded. The immune system is sort of like a camel's back with straws. So you could put a straw in the camel's back and you're not going to notice it. Put another straw, you're not going to notice it. Third, fourth, fifth straw, you're not going to notice it. But somewhere along the line, you're going to put a sixth or seventh or 10th straw in the back and it's going to break. Mm-hmm. That's how the immune system is. The immune system can handle a certain amount of straws. But once you've got 10 straws on the camel's back and then you put an 11th straw, it's going to break. And so this is a person who's already got a bunch of straws on the back. For that kind of immune reaction to happen, and that the injection was like the 11th straw, camel's back broke, and that's when you get a response. You follow what I'm saying?
I do.
Weird analogy, but you know what I'm saying.
No, I understand what you're saying. Okay, so what about carpal tunnel?
Carpal tunnel syndrome is an inflammatory condition. The carpal tunnel is a little tunnel. It's a little kind of hollow in the upper part of the hand and where the wrist and the hand meet. And so people do repetitive movements, can sometimes get inflammation there.
Show us where. Can you show us where?
It shouldn't happen. I think it's on the top here.
Okay.
Yeah. So people who do repetitive movements, like unscrewing things or I don't know, hammering things, repetitive movements with the hand, sometimes even typing, will get inflamed in that area, but it shouldn't happen. Again, there's predisposition, either from toxicity. Remember, toxicity is the carpal tunnel is part of the connective tissue. And the tendons are part of the connective tissue. The connective tissue is the great dumping ground of toxicity. And by the way, the blood is connective tissue. It's liquid connective tissue. So the connective tissue is the dumping ground of toxicity that gets into the bloodstream. And as I said earlier, the blood winds through the connective tissue, and the connective tissue acts like a strainer. And the toxins will get deposited in the connective tissue. So somebody who has carpal tunnel syndrome likely has this issue. Now, look, I know when I talk about leaky gut and histamine and toxins getting in, that people are rolling their eyes.
I love it.
I can't help it. I have
My
to say
favorite
this.
thing to hear, because it makes it simple to understand.
Yes, it's so simple. And I don't want it to be two things. I don't want it to be too simple. I don't want people to say, oh, he's always saying the digestive system. It is the digestive system. So don't be fooled by its simplicity. There's a concept in physics these days called simplexity. I'll tell you what that is in a second. I don't want to digress. We'll touch on simplexity here in a moment. So number one, yes, it's simple, but I don't want people to think it's too simple. And that's my concern when I say, oh, it's the digestive system. Do a food diary, get on your I-26, eliminate problem foods. You know, Doc says stay off of gluten all the time. People say, oh, that's just Doc. He's talking about gluten. He's right. It is gluten. It's other things too, but the point is it's digestive. The second thing about the digestive system, which is why sometimes I feel, uncomfortable talking about it so much, is because I know people here, when we hear about food, we have a tendency to go back to childhood when our mother says to eat our vegetables. And we don't want to eat our vegetables. And then we get to be adults and we don't have to eat our vegetables anymore. And then here's Ben saying, no, eat your vegetables. I'm concerned people are going to go like, no, I'm done being a kid. I don't want to do that anymore. And I don't want to be anybody's mother or father. I don't want to be a parent. And I don't want people listening to this to be infants. But you got to say it, because carpal tunnel's not supposed to happen. If it does happen, it's a combination of one, toxicity leading to a predisposition to inflammation, and two, nutritional deficiencies, particularly in the fats, because the fats are anti-inflammatory and inflammatory. So I forgot to mention the most important anti-inflammatory fats. You mentioned it, which is omega-3s and omega-6s too. By the way, sometimes people say, oh, and sometimes I get emails from people say, oh, omega-6s, they're pro-inflammatory, and people, right? You've heard that too, right? Oh, pro-inflammatory.
I saw a video tonight. The guy said, don't use something because it has omega-6. I'm like,
yeah, right. That's called a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Okay. Yes. First of all, well, let's leave aside the processed part, because anything that's processed is going to be pro-inflammatory, omega-6 or omega-3. But let's just talk about non-processed omega-6. Yes, they're inflammatory. Omega-6, by the way, real quickly, quick digression, and then I want to talk about simplexity real quick. Omega-6, when we say omega-6, that refers to the type of chemical structure. And lots of things have an omega-6 chemical structure. So when we really talk about omega-6, we mean omega-6 essential fats, which is only one, and it's technically called it's technically called linoleic acid. Linoleic acid is omega-6 essential fatty acid. Omega-3 essential fatty acid is called alpha-linolenic acid. There's lots of things that are omega-6, lots of things that are omega-3. So it's sort of confusing and not terribly accurate to just say omega-6 and omega-3. But in the vernacular, that's what everybody says. So omega-6 essential fatty acid, that is linoleic acid, which is found in corn and soy and really throughout nature, is the most abundant of the omega-6 essential fatty acids in the body. You have way more linoleic acid in the body than you do alpha-linolenic acid. So you need more linoleic acid. And then people like whoever this guy that you're listening to, people say, oh, well, but people eat corn and soy and seed oils of all kinds. Of course, they get lots of omega-6. No, they don't, because they're cooking and they're heated and they're processed. So you're getting the oils that should have the omega-6 EFAs, but for most people, because they're eating fried oils or somehow processed or salad oils or somehow cooked oils, they're not getting enough of these things. So guys like who you're referring to say, oh, well, they're pro-inflammatory. Yeah, they are. But guess what? You can't heal without inflammation. Inflammation initiates healing. So pro-inflammatory EFAs, alpha-linoleic acid, yeah, it's inflammatory, but you can't go into anti-inflammation until you have inflammation. Inflammation is part of healing. When we talk about inflammation being associated with diseases, we're talking about out of balance inflammation. we're talking about too much inflammation compared to anti-inflammation, or we're talking about chronic inflammation. And we're talking about low levels of inflammation, drip, drip, drip inflammation, not inflammation that reaches a threshold that kicks it into anti-inflammation. So yes, your linoleic acid, your omega-6 essential fatty acid is pro-inflammatory, but that's not where the inflammation comes from that causes disease. It comes from processed linoleic acid, distorted linoleic acid, in addition to all the other things we talked about with leaky gut. And along the same lines, cholesterol is the same way. Cholesterol is a fat. And cholesterol, as you know, I'm not going to talk about it now, but as most people who are listening to this probably know, is incredibly important for the body. It may be, and I personally think it is, the most important and most functional molecule in the body. And there's so many reasons why cholesterol is important. Just one is that it's a part of the cell membrane that helps give that cell membrane fluidity and plasticity so that hormones can sit inside it and the cell can communicate and do its business. So cholesterol is vitally important. And to lower cholesterol with a pharmacological agent doesn't make a lot of sense to a biochemist, even though it makes sense to a clinical chemist. Clinical chemistry is not biochemistry. Clinical chemistry is the chemistry of the clinic. Biochemistry is the chemistry of your body. You know, we don't want to confuse clinical chemistry, the chemistry of the clinic, with the chemistry of your body. A clinical chemist does things a biochemist would never do. So cholesterol is vital. However, when you heat cholesterol, you create something called oxycholesterol, which is an oxidized version of cholesterol. And that is a bad guy. So fats, including cholesterol, go from vital and critical and essential to biochemistry to dangerous and problematic and disease-causing via processing. And that's a key point. That's why you don't want to be processing your fats. You want to be eating them as whole and as intact as possible. One of the worst foods a human being can eat is margarine. Or now they have these spreads, they call them. They don't even call them margarine anymore. They call them spreads. These are terrible for you. And any healthcare professional who ever tells their patient to do a spread and not butter should have his license taken away. That's an awful thing to say to anybody. So I was going to tell you about this idea of simplexity. So I'm all about simplicity. I try to make things as simple as possible. And in the body, disease really is simple because it's all about inflammation. It's all about stuff getting into the blood. It's all about the digestive system toxicity, things leaking into the blood. It's really that simple in combination with nutritional deficiencies. And that's one of the things that happens when you have intestinal problems. You get this 1-2 punch of toxicity and malnourishment because nutrients are absorbed through the intestine. Once it becomes inflamed, you get toxicity and you get malnourishment. So you get this 1-2 punch. And it is that simple. However, in physics, there's a concept today called simplexity, which says that the most complex systems are formed from simple building blocks. Simplexity. And this is how the body is built. You know, I'm talking to you on my computer now, and really, we take this for granted, but I'm looking at a miracle on my computer screen. I'm looking at browsers, and I'm looking at you, and I'm talking to you, and you're in New York, and I'm in Colorado. You might as well be in Australia, or you could be on the moon for that matter, and I could be communicating to you through the computer, and there's graphics, and there's video games, and simulations. There's all kinds of stuff, but it all comes from zeros and ones. It's all derived from zeros and ones, everything. That's a classic example of simplexity. The simplest building blocks can build the most complex forms. And that's why all of the complexity of chronic degenerative diseases, all of the different ways, genetics and molecules and organ failures, all the different things that can go wrong come from very, very simple, basic building blocks. Toxicity in the blood, inflammation at the level of the intestine, eating the wrong foods, nutritional deficiencies lead to a whole almost near infinite possible amounts of symptoms and disease states and health challenges and shortened lifespans and infections and all of the different things, ways the body deteriorates. It all comes from simple building blocks, which is such great news. Because it means we don't have to know all the different molecular systems and all the different genetics that are involved, and this gene turns on and that gene turns off. And, mutations. What was I reading about mutations? I was reading about forgot what disease they're now attributing it to, a mutation in a gene. It might have been dementia. A lot of news coming out about dementia, by the way, these days. Yeah, genetics are involved, but the genes are turning on and off like Christmas tree lights based on the kind of foods you're eating, the kind of nutrients you're getting, and the kind of thoughts you're thinking, the kind of feelings you have. All of these have epigenetic or transcendent to genetic implications. They'll turn the genes on and off. So yeah, there's genetics involved. Everything's genetic, but the genes don't turn on and off accidentally or spontaneously. Here's another example of Simplexity. I was watching a commercial. There's this new disease, ATTR-CM. What's it called? It's called transthyretin. Check this out. Transthyretin amyloidosis cardiomyopathy. Oh my God. Transthyretin amyloidosis cardiomyopathy. You know what that means? That means your body is making a lot of fibers, and your heart is becoming fibrotic and not working. Period. Thyretin is a protein that carries thyroid, thigh, and vitamin A, retin. Transthyretin. It transports thyroid and thyroid hormone and vitamin A, which is called retinoid. So transthyretin, under conditions of damage, tell you why that happens in a minute, but just know this. Under conditions of damage, the body will turn transthyretin into amyloid. What's amyloid? It's a fiber. It's a repair fiber. It's a Band-Aid. It's a patch. So when your heart is damaged, the body will take this protein, it's a blood protein, and it will turn it into a fiber called amyloid. Transthyretin amyloidosis means your transthyretin is being converted into amyloid. CM is cardiomyopathy, heart disease. So this fancy ATTR-CM, there's a commercial. Oh, talk to your doctor. You may have ATTR-CM. La, la. You know, oh my God, I have ATTR-CM. You know? No, your heart is being damaged because you're eating the wrong food and you have nutritional deficiencies and there's toxicity in the blood. And it's the body, being the brilliant system it is now turning this blood protein into a Band-Aid. And the Band-Aid is there to patch up your heart. If you have dementia, Alzheimer's dementia, now there's a new blood test, right? I was just reading this today. A blood test for, we can predict Alzheimer's disease years before it happens. You know how they're going to predict it? They go into your blood and they look for amyloid. They look for the fiber because it's known that amyloid is in the brain when you have these plaques are in the brain when you have dementia. So they say, we're going to get a vaccine. We're going to get a vaccine against this amyloid so you don't get dementia. Really? That's why you're a clinical chemist and not a biochemist. Because if you're a biochemist, you say the amyloid's in the brain because your brain is deteriorating. It's degenerating. The tissue is being damaged. They say, why is the tissue being damaged? Well, I'll give you a clue. The latest treatment for dementia, Alzheimer's dementia, is Ozempic or Ozempic-like drugs. What is Ozempic? It's a blood sugar drug. That's the latest thing for dementia. Well, hello. We've been calling dementia type 3 diabetes for years. So sugar, when you have type 3 diabetes, when you have diabetes, you don't handle your sugar. Sugar builds up in the blood. It's damaging. Sugar burns things. Sugar is very hot. And so when sugar builds up in the blood, it can affect the brain. It can burn the brain. It's called glycation, technically. You get damage in the brain. So say, we'll give you a GLP-1 inhibitor. We'll give you Ozempic, and that way it'll control your blood. How about if you stop eating the Snickers bars? Or how about if you take your sweeties or your ultimate niacin instead of your Ozempic? But you see, people listening to this, they understand this, but there's only, there's not a lot of people listening to this. Most people are not listening to this. Most people are saying, I don't want to get dementia. I'm going to take some Ozempic. Because they don't realize that simply by using sweeties or your healthy blood sugar pack and laying off certain foods, you don't need the Ozempic. So amyloidosis or amyloid plaques in the brain are associated with Alzheimer's. Now they're linking, well, not now, but now it's becoming more public. Every biochemists have known this for years, but now the public is starting to catch wind via commercials that it can affect the heart. Well, guess what? Amyloidosis can affect you from head to toe. You can have Alzheimer's disease of the kidneys. You can have Alzheimer's disease of the liver. You can have Alzheimer's disease of the heart. You can have Alzheimer's disease of any soft tissue, because when it's damaged, these plaques, these fibers will start to accumulate because they're Band-Aids. And what happens in the brain, you get dementia. So now they want to have a vaccine for amyloid. No, you don't need a vaccine. You just need to figure out why the amyloid is there. Again, this is what biochemistry is about, not clinical chemistry. And it's not the clinical chemist's fault, because their job is to get rid of your symptoms, whatever they can do. They're not there to study your biochemistry. And unfortunately, the model has been corrupted by big money, and there's a lot of money in drugs. And the newest drugs, they call them biologics. And that's what all of this literature is coming out now, is about how you can use biologics for things like amyloid plaques, degenerative disease issues, for immune issues. These biologics are basically high-tech antibodies. Remember I said antibodies are like heat-seeking missiles that kill the bacteria? Well, now they can artificially make these antibodies, called monoclonal antibodies. They can make them artificially, and they can artificially decide to shoot down the cells of the immune system. Instead of shooting down the bad guys like antibodies, your body's natural antibodies do, they artificially make antibodies that shoot down immune cells, thereby reducing inflammation. Instead of saying, why is the inflammation there, and let's stop the inflammation, they sell these biologics that kill the immune, or they shoot down the immune system. Say, why would they ever do that? The money in these biologics is ungodly. It can cost you $10,000 a month for some of these biologics. So that's really what's going on here. But as long as we are ignorant of our options, we're going to think that this is the only thing we can do, and they're not going to tell us. Clinicians who's a drug company or a medical company that's making a lot of money on these biologics, they're not going to tell you, how about if you lay off the sugar? They're going to say, here's a biologic. And if your insurance company pays for it, you're not even going to notice it, that that these things are costing thousands of dollars a month. But in the long run, what do you think, our budget, the United States budget is about $4 or $5 trillion a year. Well, 3/4 of that, or half of that, or a quarter, some huge amount, I don't know how much it is, maybe a quarter to a third, is for healthcare costs. And where is that going? It's not going to you, AJ.
No,
it's not going to me. It's going to the hospital companies. And there are hospital companies that own the hospitals. It's going to the drug companies. It's going to the pharmaco-medical industry. And it's not going to the doctors either, by the way. Not the individual doctors. It's going to the corporations. Anyway, so long story short, we have options, and that's why we're here. And if you're listening to this either now or in the future, call AJ.
Wait.
And tell him you want to sign up for longevity because you want to help spread the word. You'll make some money, and you'll help change the world at the same time. Yes.
Okay, before we go, we got a couple questions, but before, I just want to make a point about the clarity in which you bring. Me, myself, as an athlete when I was younger, I can think back of what I know now, and every time I had an injured ankle, I can just think about the types of foods that I was eating back then. The fried chicken and and the Kool-Aid. I mean, the high C and the
high C. Oh no.
Yeah, and the Tang or whatever else I had.
Did you actually have high C and fried chicken at the same time?
Likely. Likely. And then and then I can look at some of the other athletes now, and they talk about one guy talks about he eats a handful of candy before every game, and he's
probably a young guy. He's probably in his 20s.
Not that
30s,
young
maybe.
anymore.
Well, he's not doing it when he's older. And
he's
by the way,
always injured.
There's a lot. He's always injured. That's right. And a lot of older athletes, they die young. A lot of aging athletes, I should say, they don't live long lives because they're doing that. Now, these days, athletes are a little bit more hip to nutrition, I will say.
And then the one guy, another guy, doesn't eat any meat, and he's always injured. Always gets injured at the playoffs.
Who is this? Somebody I would have heard of?
An NBA basketball player, a guy named Chris Paul. He's a vegetarian.
Is he still playing, Chris Paul?
Still playing.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's about 20 years probably.
I mean, close. LeBron's 39. Like you said, athletes that take care of themselves.
LeBron takes care of himself. LeBron
Yeah.
takes care of himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's serious about it. I remember when LeBron was in high school, and they were talking. Do you remember that? And they were talking about him.
Oh yeah.
He actually played in a high school game, and they actually had the networks were there at his high school game. You remember that?
Yeah, of
I
course.
was like, who is this LeBron guy? And I was watching. I was like, oh my god, 20 years later, best basketball player ever. Well, I don't know.
He's up there. He's up there.
In the argument.
He's definitely up there. Okay, so what are we gonna do about food poisoning?
Food poisoning, the universal antidote, activated charcoal. And I can tell you that from personal experience. I've had food poisoning twice. Have you ever had food poisoning?
No, I don't think so.
AJ, I can't even tell you how that you want to die when you have food poisoning. In fact, some people do die, but it is the most miserable experience. I had it twice. So I used activated charcoal both times and went a long way towards relieving it. But I'll tell you what really got rid of my food poisoning twice. Colonics. You know what a colonic is?
Yeah, but I mean,
I had a girlfriend.
Schedule that.
What's that?
Don't you have to schedule a colonic?
No, you go in emergency. You just call somebody and get an emergency. I had food poisoning. I remember New Year's Eve, or it was New Year's Day, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, 2002. And I had a girlfriend who was a colonic therapist, and she was spending New Year's Eve with me, and it was not a pleasant New Year's Eve, let me tell you. And so I was throwing up and diarrhea, the whole bit. And she told me, she said, go get a colonic. And I was like, no, I don't want to get a colonic. It's my girlfriend. I don't want to deal with that stuff. She said she would give me a colonic. And I was like, no, I'm not going to have you give me a colonic. But finally, I was so miserable, I didn't let her give me one, but I went to get a colonic. and it was amazing. It was amazing. And then the second time I got food poisoning, I knew about that, and I got the colonic again. Same thing happened. So anybody who has food poisoning, get a colonic. But the activated charcoal is great, and then make sure you're using your nightly essence, probiotics, because if you have a colonic or if you have food poisoning, you're going to lose bacteria through diarrhea or through the colonic. So make sure you replace those bacteria with the nightly essence. And by the way, probiotic bacteria are very detoxifying. They have a detoxifying property. They help clean out the digestive tract. That's one of the most important things they do for the body, is they have detoxification benefits. Also, we don't talk about this anywhere near enough, in my opinion. Plant-derived minerals are among nature's best blood detoxifiers. So for toxic blood, just plant-derived minerals have blood detoxifying properties. That's why it's healthy start pack, man. God bless Dr. Wallach, man. He knew about these plant-derived minerals. You can't underestimate overestimate how unbelievably important that observation was about the power of not minerals, but plant-derived minerals. In fact, I got to get going here, but we should talk about plant-derived minerals on our next chat.
Okay.
Any questions I missed?
How does astaxanthin work for the immunity and the skin?
Astaxanthin is a plant molecule that functions as an adaptogen. It's technically, they refer to it as a carotenoid. And these carotenoids are very important for helping balance out biochemistry in the body. Additionally, astaxanthin has benefits for the eyes and the skin, for that matter. So it's very important for helping modulate solar energy. So for people who are dealing with macular degeneration, the eyes are subject to a lot of abuse from light. Light's very aggressive. So your eyes are always looking in the light, and over time, especially if you're dealing with nutritional deficiencies and toxicities, eye issues can occur. And eye issues are associated with diabetes and blood sugar problems. They're associated with intestinal problems. They're associated with age, simply because the eyes are so subject to attack, I don't want to say attack, but energetic flux, input of energy from solar light. Astaxanthin dampens that solar energy. That's sun energy. It also does the same thing for the skin. So it's great to do for people who are worried about skin cancer, or worried about sunburn if they're going out, laying out in the sun, or you're playing golf or tennis or whatever, going on a cruise. Take it orally. It gets deposited in your skin. It's stored in your skin. Astaxanthin is what gives salmon the pink color. And that's one of the reasons why salmon is such a powerful food. And that's one of the reasons why salmon are such powerful fish. Salmon are really powerful. They're going against, you know, how, when they do their little, they're going upstream when they're doing their migrating thing. And one of the ways they get so much power is from molecules like astaxanthin. So astaxanthin is a carotenoid. It's got very important protective properties for the skin and for the eyes, for the liver, for various parts of the body. It's technically, you can think of it like an adaptogen. And carotenoids in general have these properties, but perhaps the most well-known or the most important carotenoid, or the most, I would say important, but the most well-known carotenoid is beta carotene. And beta carotene is a carotenoid that gets turned into vitamin A. And so vegetarians and vegans who can't use vitamin A because vitamin A is only found in animal foods will use beta carotene. So carotenoids are extremely functional molecules for protection, and beta carotene, in addition, can actually be converted into vitamin A.
Are bananas FODMAPs?
What's that?
Are bananas FODMAPs food?
Bananas are FODMAPs food, absolutely.
Okay. So the last question, I'm going to give you a hint here. The answer is GN. So
say again?
The answer to this question is GN. So
GN?
Who is a better interviewer, me or George Norrie?
George is great, but you're good too. By the way,
the answer is George Norrie.
George is he's a pretty damn good interviewer. He's really good. I really enjoy going. I don't like the time. It's really hard to do this time, but he's great, and I love going on coast to coast. Let me caveat bananas. The FODMAPs are accumulated in ripening. So you can see a banana is kind of firm when it's not ripe, but then it gets more soft and mushy over time as it ripens. That softness and mushiness is a sign that you're getting more FODMAPs. Softness and mushiness is really is where you get FODMAPs. It also gets
sweeter
it's also sweeter. That's yeah, exactly. FODMAPs tend to be, a lot of FODMAPs are sweets, not all of them. But FODMAPs can be sweet, saccharides. So the FODMAPs part of a banana is in the ripe bananas, not so much the firm bananas. But most people don't eat firm bananas; they eat ripe bananas.
Well, you still have a long night ahead of you. Do well.
Thank you.
So I'll be sitting by the phone waiting for people to call in with their questions.
Awesome.
And
all right. Somebody just texted me. Okay. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. And AJ, you are a prince. Where'd you go? AJ, where'd you go?
You gotta say goodbye to the people.
Oh, we said goodbye. All right. Bye, everybody.